tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, thanks so much for this invitation. My name is Saeed Al Hassan Al Khazraji. I am a founder of Manhat, a deep tech startup based in Abu Dhabi. We focus our efforts to provide solutions for sustainable water production so we can sustain our future for the UAE.
Thank you. We have one more guest coming. I think she's running a bit late, but I will start the conversations. Of course, this is Water Week at Expo, and Water Week is coinciding with the International Day for Water, which is March 22nd, hence why we decided to have Water Week here at Expo. A little bit about where we are. This building is a LEED Platinum building and one of 7 LEED buildings at the Expo site. And it's not just about the certificate, it's about the fact that the innovations that we've used in this building reduces water consumption in a water scarce area. That's very important. Adding to that, the solutions that you are bringing and the depth of knowledge from a scientific perspective that you're bringing is very, very important to the water conversations, but also to finding solutions in a water scarce country, but also even the water that we have is most of the time polluted. So we have to start talking and having really hard conversations about how we solve all of this. So I'll start with you, Dr. Dinesh. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you're bringing forward as a scientist.
No, I think at the end of your question, you made a right statement. I think we should think seriously about this issue. Not just like another issue, but I think it's the serious issue because water is an essential element to our life. I think what I'm trying to do is, if you think about the water resources, especially for this country, we are not so lucky with natural resources here. So we have to get something out of existing sources, right?
Exactly.
Be it seawater, or be it polluted water. So what I'm trying to do is one of the areas of the sources where we call it grey water, which means polluted water. So it covers almost like 30% of our usage, right? So if we can find a method with which we can recover this water for the normal use, it may or may not be for drinking water. I mean, even drinking water is achievable. If you see the Singapore, they already achieved it. That's an exception. But it's not just about technology, it's about perspectiveness too. People are supposed to accept the reality sometime. But I think what I'm trying to do, at least if we purify this grey water, then we can use it for other purpose, like agricultural use, right? Or maybe day-to-day life use. Not for drinking, if not, okay? So, I mean, that's the purpose of doing things here. And what I'm trying to do, I think there are existing technologies in this line. But what we are trying to do in my group is tackling emerging pollutants. Because, you know, as population is increasing, the human beings are using a lot of stuff, and at the same time they are leaving it to the nature. So be it pharmaceutical products, or be it cosmetic products, or be it pesticides, because food security, we will talk about it at some point. So all these are going to the water stream, right? So, and all of them are in a nanogram per liter, kind of very low concentration, but they can really harm you.
Of course.
So we are trying to develop material that can be used to remove these kind of contaminants from the water so that we can use it for better purpose.
That's absolutely amazing. And you mentioned food, which is quite important. And without water security, we cannot have food security. So I move to you, Dr. Saeed, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you do, because your innovation literally tackles the food security as it's linked to the water security.
Yeah, so what we do at Manhat, we are developing patented technology that will allow us to produce water through a sustainable mean. If we look at the natural water cycle, it starts by water evaporating from every open water surface, whether it's the Arabian Gulf, a river, a lake, the bottle next to us filled with water is actually evaporating because of the temperature difference. So water will evaporate inevitably, and then it will form the cloud and come back to us as a rain. Unfortunately, in our area, we don't get enough rain. But if you look at the amount of water evaporating from the Arabian Gulf, it is 10 times the total global capacity of desalination.
Wow.
So if you add up all the desalinated water globally,
yes,
the Arabian Gulf evaporates 10 times that amount. So such huge quantity of water is available for us to exploit. And we develop devices to allow us to capture this vapor on open water surfaces without using electricity, and hence we don't emit any CO2 and we don't deal with the brine, because the current technologies in reverse osmosis, you take water from the Arabian Gulf and you split it. You make one is sweeter, the other one you make it even saltier, and then you send it back to the Arabian Gulf. So it is not sustainable because something will give up eventually with this dynamics. It depends on many different factors. So once you produce water sustainably by adapting the natural water cycle, you are already in the game of allowing you a chance to produce fresh crops on a floating farm concept. So we're trying to utilize this water on the surface of the sea to produce crops of a high value, so we can also address the food security element. Because we know that 70% of the water we consume or we produce is actually used for irrigation.
True.
So you might as well produce the water, create crops, and sell the crops. So that way you can at least give yourself a chance in minimizing your dependency on future desalination capacities.
That's amazing. I think, where are you in the process?
So in Manhunt, we are an infant technology. So a lot of time they ask us, are you in business? I said, we are 2 years old company. You cannot compare my technology to a technology like reverse osmosis, which has been effectively in work for 70 years. So we are in the prototyping phase, and we are lucky to have a good collaboration with different government entities in Abu Dhabi ports, for example, in the Dar properties in Abu Dhabi, to allow us access to their canals to install our devices, which they are operational, to allow us to optimize the production of water in that location, so we can enhance the production of water we get from these devices.
That's absolutely amazing, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we live in a humid area. We have in Terra, we have a pilot for capturing humidity and creating water, and there's so many different technologies. But this is the first time I've heard of farming on the sea.
Yes.
I think we have our next guest. It's wonderful to see you. Expo is a madhouse right now, so we totally understand. Please don't worry about it.
it was a sprint to get
Dr.
here.
Lina, it's wonderful to see you here. Maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself and about what you do.
Sure. My name is Lina. I'm assistant professor of chemistry at Khalifa University, along with my colleague Dinesh. We're in the same department.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm also an entrepreneur. I have a startup, which was a spin-off from research I carried out with my group at the university. We're interested in looking at the diversity of plants in the desert and the chemical diversity of the plants themselves, and then we utilize the chemicals that these plants produce for a variety of health applications, one of which is skincare. How does it relate to water? I mean, plants in the desert are drought tolerant. They're able to actually withdraw water from the atmosphere. They're quite sustainable because they don't really need external supplies of water or irrigation. Mm-hmm. And one plant in particular, Tetrina catarensis, is the most abundant one on the landscape. It's a perennial, so it grows year-round. And we're inspired by it, so we're actually looking at using it as a plant to co-cultivate other edible crops with, so that they can lean on it for their support to get water. I also have another startup where we're looking at upcycling spent coffee waste and biorefining it into value-added products. So one of my interests is in recovering water from the brewed coffee waste. Mm-hmm. So almost 50% of its mass is water. That's quite heavy from a transportation logistics perspective. So recovering that water makes sense not only for transportation sustainability, but also recovering the water into the gray water system for reuse.
Absolutely, and I think that also affects when we talk about emissions, it reduces the emissions drastically for transportation as well because of the weight. So back to you, Dr. Dinesh. I mean, we were talking, when I was reading through your bio and I was looking at what you're doing, and it's fascinating, but you must have seen, and you said there are other technologies, but I think you must have seen a lot of challenges to create this, or how did it come about and how did you resolve these challenges?
I think there are two types of challenges because we are in academic research.
Yes.
To understand. So academic research is always having a dilemma between fundamental research and applied research. Right?
That's right.
So, but definitely if you want to apply something, you have to know what's happening with your research, right? That's fundamental research.
Yeah.
So one of the basic challenges for my research so far, even though it's in research and development level now, is convincing industrial people to pour money to scale it up. Because in our academic setup, we can go up to gram scale. We can't go to kilogram or ton scale. So to convince that, we have to challenge existing technology.
Of course.
This is something beyond my control. So not only me, I mean, I'm just talking about general academic research people. But good thing about this country, at least, I mean, that's the reason when I moved here, I started working on water-related stuff. They are at least prioritizing this area.
Yep.
And if you have ready-to-transfer technology, then they are ready to invest. I think that's the reason, even though we have lack of natural resources, this country is doing well so far on waterfront.
Yeah.
Because they sense the requirement, or they sense the challenges at early stage. But still, I think we have to cross the road a lot, because still industrial people are having the perspective about academician.
Yes.
They think we just do something and publish a paper, not go beyond that. I may agree to some extent, but in general, the major challenge for me now, at this point of time, translating this research into industrial scale. Another problem here for me, imagine I have a membrane material. Membrane is the material we use to purify or desalination or whatever. So if I go and if I approach industrial person, see, look, I have more efficient membrane here. Can you take it? The immediate problem with company to adopt this change, they have to change their existing technology quite a bit. This is financially demanding and psychologically demanding too, to accept the reality. So I think there is a bottleneck here. The convincing industrial people is the biggest challenge for me. I mean, for example, if you do any research, at the end of the day, especially when we are dealing with important issues like water, so all of us want to take it into next level that can be used, right, somewhere. So I think for me, this is the translational phase is a little bit sluggish.
Yes.
It takes changes in multi-dimension. So, but I think we are getting there, I believe, because I think now even industrial people started to believe at some point they have to go back to fundamental research to understand things. You can't rely on existing technology for centuries. I think that is one of the challenges now. We have to think about replacing aging infrastructure or technology. So other than that, another challenge may be attracting youngsters to do this water-related research. Because the problem with youngsters, I mean, they can get attracted to something like, for example, artificial intelligence. I have nothing against it.
I understand.
Okay? But I think it's fancy. I do understand that. But I think attracting people to research like water takes a lot of effort for people like us, because this will not give you fancy result from day one, right?
Yeah.
And also the public, perspective about this issue.
Yes.
We don't care as long as ADDC or DIVA is giving us water, and if we can afford it, we are fine. So I think the problem here is, as a society, we fail to identify the value of water. In turn, I think it is transferring to younger generation, and they are not taking this as challenge or an important aspect of the society. I think for me, I think if I'm interviewing a lot of researchers, if at least 20-30% of the students should come up and say, I want to take this challenge because this is very important for next generation, or his own life as well as next generation.
Yeah.
So this is another challenge. I think they are not getting attracted to this area. So that is another challenge for me, because you need people. You need passionate people to do the research. Especially in this country, I think research is something seeing from the distance, because it's a hard job. People are not ready to take it in general. So that is another challenge I'm facing. And there are many challenges. We can keep on talking about it.
I think you mentioned a very good point about perception, about people seeing water come out of a tap and it's just easy. It's not going to cost them anything. But I think the perception also about electricity or any of the valuable resources that we have is the same thing. But also I feel that it's changing, because it's changing from the top up.
Sure.
And we look at environmental social governance that now becoming more, I don't want to say more economically viable, but it is more mandated, so it has to be more economically viable. Everybody has to report on ESG. So any company, private sector, has to report on ESG. Dubai is creating a new ESG index through its stock exchange. You see Saudi, all of the other countries are looking at ESG. So I think as they go through this transformation to understand what it is, I think that there is going to be, research like yours is going to be more appealing. And I think work like yours, Dr. Saeed, also is going to be more appealing. And I'm coming to you to ask the same question. What are your challenges?
Well, I think I have to echo Dr. Dinesh in certain elements of his comments, but I will highlight the challenge in the ecosystem of startups based on physical science, intellectual properties. The challenge there is that usually it takes longer time for physical science-based startups to generate revenue because you are bound by the physics itself. You have to create physical things to allow you to evaluate their performance and their properties. So, for example, in our case, we opened shop for 2 years almost. Mm-hmm. We are in the pre-seed and we are seeking funding support. The challenge for us was when we talked to venture capitalists, they told us, okay, you are telling me that this is the performance of your prototype, but you also did not tell me that this is basically the optimized version of your prototype. Yeah. I tell him yes, because I need more resources to allow me to continue developing this technology, so I can give you the limits of my device. And based on the limits of my device, I can position myself in the landscape of water production. Am I a large producer? Am I cheap producer? Am I producing huge quantities, small quantities? Yeah, am I more efficient? Am I more sustainable? And so on. So to go through what we call this is the valley of death in technology development is you need a grant allow you to bridge this. Yeah. And usually here we have a fantastic system for grants for universities.
That's right.
Because over there the risk is limited. The outcomes are two things. You educate the students and you publish papers. True. The outcomes in a grant for startups is basically you will lose the money. Yeah. Chances are if the product was not developed properly. So the risk is high and there's still no appetite to take that risk. But if we don't have mechanism to allow us to get these grants, a lot of startups will be dying in this valley, and they cannot overcome it because it's basically a bridging mechanism. So when you get the technology ready, the investors will be happy to invest because they do show interest in the sustainability element of our technology.
Yeah.
But they need performance indicators of our technology so they can commit the resources to help us to go to the next step. So that is where one of the challenges we have been facing in our technology. And I can go long, and I have a longer list of challenges, but this is one of the key ones that I like to highlight.
But I think it's like almost a chicken and the egg situation.
Yes.
Get the proof of concept, then I'll give you money. But
yes.
in order for you to get the proof of concept, you need money. So
yes.
it's almost a cycle of, and I think to be honest with you, I think this is, to me, the UAE and Dubai is a perfect place to solve this issue. And I think through the talks that we've had, through everything, you never know what might come up. But for me, I think this is the perfect place to solve this issue. I've
yes.
seen other startups in the US or in Europe massively don't even get to where you are because there is absolutely no interest or no funding to what they're doing. And I think as we move closer to looking at the net zero target of 2050, there is going to be a lot more opportunities for this because it's all interlinked.
Indeed.
And
Indeed.
I'm going to ask you this, that I promise we're going to talk not about the challenges, but about how we overcome these challenges. Please go ahead, Dr. Lina.
I mean, everything that my colleagues have said is quite valid. For me, I don't really see challenges as challenges. They're just kind of short-term roadblocks, right? Mm-hmm. I think like with entrepreneurship, the most important element is the person actually part of the project. Yeah. You have to take risk. I mean, risk is part of entrepreneurship. Without risk, you're just a business person opening shop, right? So entrepreneurship is about innovation. It's about creating something new. It's about bringing something to the table. I agree that there's fundamental research that's required, but sometimes there's research that already exists that people have not tapped into. Yeah. There is a whole data bank of different patents that are not utilized. So you could actually go and see, and some of them are quite useful. And as scientists, we're able to assess these patents and see, can we actually apply them? And can we get the right people who can see the vision? We need visionaries to step
Absolutely.
in. And this is how you do fundraising. So fundraising is done through, not necessarily venture capitalists. You can crowdsource. Mm-hmm. You can actually self-fund yourself. I mean, for me as an entrepreneur, I started funding my own projects by myself because I really believed in what I was doing. And then, other people would see that you have the passion to do it. And that's when people would invest in you, that invest in the person mostly, because they believe that, they look at the person doing it. Of course, the ecosystem here is still new. There's challenges with banking and financing. I would say this is the major challenge, is mm-hmm. the banking system and the financial system. But I believe the government's going to support facilitating that. As we can see now, they're really helping mobilize a lot of startups and providing the right ecosystem to support their development. I'm very optimistic. I mean, my first startup was actually set up in 2017.
Wow.
It was quite new, right, the whole concept. And now we're starting to actually see the fruit of our labor. And we brought, something from lab to market. So that by itself took 2 years. We brought a new ingredient to market. So there's challenges, you're navigating, but you can also mobilize a lot of resources in kind, not necessarily through financial support, but actually through, again, people that believe in your vision and provide you with the resources to enable your project.
Absolutely.
This is called the Dreamers Dialogue. I'm a dreamer, and I love working with the youth specifically because their minds are still fresh and they're not molded by the system. And we have to kind of think outside the box. That's the only way for survival. And we saw it in COVID, right? We all adapted. This is the beautiful thing about humanity, is we can adapt and we will adapt. Same thing for water. This is my 2 cents on this. So.
No, that's amazing. And I totally agree with you. The investment sometimes comes from the passion, and all three of you are very passionate about what you do. And even though, Dr. Dinesh was saying, it's true. AI is more fun than water, but what we've seen, and we did some surveys even to even understand about Expo and how are sustainable-minded people going to come to Expo? Is it the perception that's going to not make them come? And so we did some research around that. We found the majority of young people are more interested in coming because it's a sustainable Expo, which is absolutely astounding. And I think the understanding of that as we go through, as we move forward, I think there will be more young people interested. I get a lot of people on LinkedIn messaging me and saying, how did you get into this field? How did you, and you probably have the same thing. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see that transition. And you're right, COVID kind of accelerated it. I'm going to be a little bit more technical because you were talking about, I'll ask a couple of questions to you, Dr. Dinesh. I think one of them is that you talked about the membrane and about how it is. Can you describe it a little bit more? And then do you have an IP for it?
Not yet. We are working on it.
Okay.
The material, what I am doing, I mean, we are doing multiple, we are targeting multiple pollutants.
Yeah.
We have two approaches here. One is if you can have a single material, it's idealistic, okay? If you can have a single material which can remove most of the emerging pollutants efficiently, that's best. But I think it's very hard given the complexity of the polluted water.
Yes.
So it's very hard to find a single system which can do everything, right?
Of course.
So we are going in parallel approach now. What we are trying to do, we are trying to develop a material which can take the classes of material, right? Even within pollutants, we can differentiate them like organic pollutants, we can differentiate them as heavy metals, we can differentiate them as pesticides, we can differentiate them as herbicides, we can differentiate them in different categories. So what we are trying to do, we are dissecting this one and try to develop a material which is highly efficient and to say best one available till date to remove these class of pollutants from the polluted water efficiently. When I say efficiently, I mean technical words, I think we are seeing two important aspects here. One is how fast we can remove that from the source.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. If you are thinking about, say, for example, if I want to use the material, what I developed in, say, purification columns.
Yes.
In every house or somewhere, wherever you want to use, then I think within the fraction of seconds or within few seconds when it passed through this bed, so then it has to remove the pollutant from the water, right? So that's where kinetics, I mean technically kinetics plays the role. So the one thing we want to tackle now is developing highly or fast kinetic materials, right? So it's very important for the kind of flow measurement, which what we are talking about. The second important thing is, okay, you have a material, it can remove pollutant very fast, but it is taking very little.
Yeah.
So that is also a problem, right? For example, you can't build a big column size in every house to remove something. So the total overall efficiency, or what we call it as maximum removal efficiency, it comes under thermodynamics, right? So in that case, also we are tackling issues where we are developing material which can take maximum capacity. What I mean to say, compared to existing material, right? And the biggest and most challenging aspect of emerging pollutants, as I told you, is the amount or concentration of these pollutants in water source, right?
Excellent.
Polluted water source. It's very small amount, small quantity. I think people may think, maybe general audience may think, if it is small quantity, removal is easier. But scientifically, thermodynamically, it's opposite direction. If you have low concentration, removal is even harder, right? So this is even bigger challenge when you think about the material development. So we now currently having a lot of materials, both powder form, that's we want to use it in columns, cartridges and this kind of thing. And also we are thinking of using, as I told you, for example, if you have one material for one particular class, we are thinking of a column where you have different beds of different materials. Once you pass your polluted water, each bed will take different class of material and pollutants, right?
Yeah.
So that is one thing we are doing. And also we have some membranes for very specific purpose. For example, bromate. Have you heard about bromate? I mean, I think people neglected it till a couple of years ago. Then there are a lot of commercial water bottles are withdrawn from the commercial stores.
Absolutely.
Just because of bromate, because we can't avoid this. Bromate is produced after the real purification step. It's a disinfection process where usually we follow ozonolysis, we call it technical term. During the ozonolysis, whatever bromine remained in the water is turned into bromate. And this bromate is highly carcinogenic and it is giving a lot of problem. It can even cause cancer, right?
Yep.
So we are developing material particularly for this kind of pollutant, okay?
To pull it from the
water. To absorb these kind of things. So all in all, I think now our aim, or at least we achieve to some extent in gram scale, we have different materials. I would call it library of materials.
Yes.
They can selectively and efficiently take different classes of pollutants. Also, we have materials, they are tackling really important pollutants, but it is not tackled by the existing water purification plants or system. So we need these materials after post-treatment, I would call it, maybe a last stage just before drinking water.
So there would be in a filter, let's say, in the sink or something like that.
That's what we are planning for.
Okay. Very interesting. So I'm going to come to you, Dr. Saeed, and I loved how you explained that it mimics your technology mimics the natural flow, and hence does not need any electricity, let's say, or energy to use it. And I just want to know a little bit more about that, because I'm trying to get a little bit more technical, but not too technical.
Sure.
And it's biomimicry, isn't it? It's basically what we call biomimicry, or is it replicating nature's way?
Yeah, I'm replicating the natural water cycle.
Yes.
Not a biological species.
Of course.
So if you look at water is liquid, and it has what we call a vapor pressure.
Yes.
Which means that it evaporates at a specific temperature to give you a specific amount of vapor on top of it as a gas phase. So, and if you look at, and this happens usually when you have a temperature above 0 degrees Celsius. So when you have a body of water at 30 degrees Celsius, the water will evaporate at the molecular level. Mm-hmm. This evaporated water will be in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So instead of allowing this vapor to go and form the cloud, we capture it, we condense it in this container. So the condensing part happens when the temperature goes down during the night. Mm-hmm. Okay, you effectively make the natural water cycle inside this container in a daily basis. Because the sun so far rises on daily basis and it sets on daily basis.
I like this so far.
So it's an inevitable thing that is going to happen. And actually the evaporation is happening regardless, whether I put a container, I don't put a container, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. And the only thing we are trying to do is to get some of this evaporated water to produce fresh water, and then we can use it for our purpose. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the process we are adapting.
And it's perfect. I mean, I said biomimicry, and that's wrong. You're absolutely right, because we're not. It's not a biological, but you're literally mimicking the way nature works, or working with it.
Yes.
To create water. You're not using anything synthetic or anything like that, which is the beauty of what you're trying to do. And then, if you look at linking it to floating farms,
Yes.
again, that takes it to a whole new level, because you're not only solving a water problem, you're also looking at food security, which go hand in hand.
Yeah, actually the funny part is in these 2 years, when we tried to basically utilize the technology, we went through many different scenarios. Do we sell the technology? Do we license it? Do we sell the device? Shall I sell the water? And then when you talk to different stakeholders, we realized that the best way for us is to monetize this water, to create crops, because crops are more valuable as a startup for us than selling the water as a commodity.
Really?
So it came as a result of business analysis, not necessarily, at the beginning we said, obviously we did have one of the patents to do irrigation right away.
Yes.
We have 3 patents, and this family, one of the patents is about irrigating trees immediately on open water surfaces. So from that angle, when we talk to different stakeholders, we realized that, okay, perhaps the food security angle is more attractive as a startup. The technology is the same. I'm still using the same thing to produce water, but instead of selling the water, I will give you the fruit of that water.
Of course, yeah.
And that will be more better as a business for us.
That's interesting. So you used the business analysis, let's say, to monetize and drive it forward, which is really interesting.
Yeah, because a lot of vegetables and fruits are 70% water anyway.
Anyway, exactly. So there's 70% water, and then we have what, 2/3 of the world masses.
Yes,
is
there's
water.
something about 70%. Through all my analysis, 70% is all over the place. Maybe 71, but 70 is the number that we always see.
Very interesting. And I think, Dr. Lina, you mentioned a plant, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, because I've not heard of this before, and to me this is fascinating.
Well, I mean, I could talk about the plant, but I actually want to inspire the youth more.
Please.
The plant is very interesting just because it's perennial, it grows on its own, it is self-sustained, it can get its own nitrogen, which nobody can do besides certain bacteria that can fix nitrogen from the atmosphere into biologically available form. It's a beautiful plant, it has a lot of health benefits, it's also food for camels. But what I want to talk about is water, because that's really what I thought this conversation
is about water, of course.
So I just kind of been inspired a lot by space recently.
Yeah.
And I just did a quick, look at how people in space utilize water. And I think really this is how we should start thinking about the future for our planet, because right now the cost of water is still cheap. I mean, what is it, like in the US it's about $1.50 a gallon, which is, it's affordable, right?
Yeah.
But let's think about it in space, right? So in space, a gallon of water, to actually transport 1 gallon of water to space, is close to $88,000 or $90,000. Wow. 1 gallon, right? And in space, they don't have the luxury like we do. So the average household or the average person apparently uses about 25 to 30. This is like someone who's responsible, 30 gallons of water per day. Yeah. In space, they only use 1. So let's go back to that $80,000. So essentially, if they're going to transport water to space, every person is going to need per day that $80,000. And you have multiplied that by 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then the number of people. So it doesn't make sense for astronauts to do that. So they have to actually be more innovative. Mm-hmm. And they have what we call a closed loop system. Yep. And this closed loop system allows you to recirculate water. So actually their sweat, their urine, so our excretions are actually utilized to create the drinking water that they drink. And interestingly, okay, so I don't know if anyone here has watched Dune. Have you guys watched Dune? So Dune is it was actually a novel written in the early 60s. Yeah. And it's crazy because, Frank, the guy who wrote the novel, the writer, he was probably a visionary back then, right? Because he was thinking about, futuristic worlds and planets. And one of the planets is a desert that's uninhabitable. Mm-hmm. And on this planet, there's a spice that gives you extraordinary powers. But the problem is, this space environment is inhabitable. Mm-hmm. And you're still human, so you still need water. So they actually have these bodysuits that they call still suits that and it explains in detail what the suit looks like, right? So the suit typically, what it's supposed to do is provide life support for the person wearing it through recirculating your own waste, so that you're essentially, you're sweating, that sweat is purified and you're drinking it again. And that's really what we have to start thinking about. It's about making these technologies more available to the general public here on planet Earth. And actually there are different research groups that have been doing this research for years, and now they're scaling it up to closed loop systems, where it's being implemented to support water production for hospitals and schools. So for places like the UAE and hyper-arid climates, this is really the direction. Another thing is sponge cities.
Yes.
So here's another fact that I looked up, because I was always curious, you know, how much, even though there's not much rainfall in the UAE, if you actually quantify it, it's about 5 billion cubic meters. It sounds massive, but in comparison to like the Amazon, it's not. But if you want to visualize what that quantity is, that's almost 2 million Olympic-sized pools. Visualize that, right? So if we can actually design the city, the infrastructure in the city, to absorb and suck that water and recharge the aquifer system, that's another way of, you know, moving forward. And it takes time, but I mean, this is where the dream becomes reality, and it takes people from all sorts of disciplines to come and participate.
But do you think, you raised a good point about looking at it from a space perspective, but do you think that there's a perception that we have to overcome? Because we did see technologies, I mean, if you go to the Expo Live grantee, we have this beautiful pavilion called A Good Place, where you see all these dreamers, all these people who have done amazing things around the world. And one of the things that we always see is that what they need to overcome, and sometimes what they need to overcome is not financing, it's perception. So do you see that? I mean, again, I'm looking at the space versus here and how they utilize it. That means people are actually doing it. They're doing it in space, but they're doing it. So is there a way to change that perception?
We have to change that perception. Necessity, right? I mean, it's not economically feasible to do that in space, and it's not going to be economically feasible to do that on Earth if we continue on our trajectory right now, which I'm very optimistic, by the way, because I think the generations that are coming now are more digitalized, and they're more, I don't want to say robotic, but they're bionic at the moment. So I think this generation actually will accept it. They will. It's all about education. The more educated the population becomes, all of that is just, you know, it's not really biases, but it's not knowing, or
it's true. It is not knowing.
It's just education.
Yeah, I mean, when we tested a few things, the air to water technologies that you see. We tested so many of them, and what we saw is a lot of people were hesitant to even drink from that, even though it's perfectly purified water. And the moment they overcame that, it worked out. So it's true, but the perception is very important, because again, I see that you're right. The younger people are more, will try anything. They're more bold, but they also have the more knowledge because of the wider digital platform that they have.
Just take a bunch of people, throw them in the middle of the desert.
Let's
give them a gallon of water and a still suit, and tell them survive. That's how, you know.
That can be a reality TV, by the way.
I think
absolutely.
So. Although the still suits doesn't exist
yet. Lina, sorry. I think I am the one who mentioned perspective word at least 10 times by now.
But it's
I think
true,
there is
though.
a statistics by, I think, World Water Forum or somebody. Even forget about using urine recirculated water. Currently, of course, things will change, I'm sure. But using even reused water for drinking water, at least about 88% of people are not willing to do that. But I think matter of the fact here is, for example, if you have a choice between pizza, donut, burger, and everything else, then definitely you would pick. But I think if the day would come where you have no choice, only one food, if you are hungry, you have to eat it. I mean, that's the concept. But I think my worry here is, do you want to wait until we don't have anything, or do we need to start it now? I mean, that's the most important aspect here. So forget about drinking. You know, there is a statistic, even in UAE, there are people, they are not ready to eat vegetable or fruits grown by using
TSE.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, reused water.
Treated sewage effluents.
So I think the problem comes here with that's why I think I mentioned it, I think, you know, in a periphery of my other discussion.
Yeah.
I think as a society, as a parents, I have 2 little kids. As a parents, are we teaching our kids about the value of water?
That's true.
Certainly 90% of parents are not doing that, right? So I think the problem is we take water as, of course, as long as I have money and as long as the suppliers are giving things, that's fine.
There's water coming from the tap.
It's coming, right? So I think we have to make it as a academic topic.
Yeah.
Maybe even it's just like in any classroom, maybe only 20% of people may absorb this as a serious thing, but at least 20% is a big number. So I think we have to make, I would call it as a culture of accepting the fact we will not have enough water in future, right? So, and also just like any other invention, I think especially common people, how they take it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay, there are challenges. Of course, there are people, they will work out and we will get a solution. But until it comes to their own home or their individual usage, they will not take it seriously. I think we have to make it a serious social change, a cultural change, where we have to tell youngsters, start with youngsters. And I think if you see my statement here in this Dreamers Who Can Do Pavilion, I think the biggest wealth we can give to next generation is pure air and pure water.
Yes.
But how many of us thinking about it? We always think about maybe building a villa or apartment or buying a lot of gold or platinum to our kids, but we are not talking about having a pure water or pure air.
But also, I think, look, the younger generation, I mean, and I see it, for example, with recycling. You see the youngsters telling their parents, no, throw it in this bin, don't throw it in this bin, this is not good for our planet. I think the same kind of conversations that they're having at school about recycling or about reducing waste, they should have about water. The other thing is, if you go to the Dutch pavilion, I loved it because it was given to me and my husband was laughing about it, is they're selling these shower timers, and it's literally a timer for the shower so that you don't take long showers. And my husband picked it up and said, here, you need this. And I'm in sustainability, and I have an e-car and all of this other stuff. And it's very true. And it made me conscious about me taking shorter showers now. These are the types of things I think we need to start at a young age for our children.
I think not just telling, I think we have to make it as a practice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way. I think we have to make it strict.
Yes.
I think the human beings psychologically having a problem until it comes as a strict measure, we don't take it seriously. I think we have to make it serious. We have to make it a strict action. You have to do it.
Exactly.
There is no choice. You have to do it. So I think that's the only way we can going forward.
Yeah. So I have one last question for all of you, and I think you've kind of answered it, and I'll start with Dr. Lina. So if you have, and you talked about it a lot, but I'm going to go back to, you're an entrepreneur, you're definitely a dreamer. I love your positiveness and your attitude. If you wanted to tell younger people who are following your path and who are watching this and listening to you, what would be your advice to them?
Oh man, the advice.
Advice is
a lot of advice. No, but I would say like the biggest advice is follow your heart. I know this sounds very wishy-washy, right? But you have to kind of really listen to yourself and not anyone around you. There's people who are going to support you, and then there's people who are going to not and tear you down. And I think surround yourself with the right people that are going to be uplifting, and also keep your mind open. So never shut down an opinion or an idea, because you might actually learn from it. So also diversify your circle. Don't just stick around the same people with the same mindsets. I would say like explore. Yeah. Get out of the classroom, you know, go mingle with the world and see what's out there. Just be present. I'd say be present, like fully present. This would be my advice. My main advice.
I love
Other
it.
advice is to follow.
And I'm still going to ask you about the plant, by the way, because I'm very interested. Dr. Saeed, what would be your advice?
I think I can advise them in two actions, observe and act. I think they need to observe what's going around them and use their observations, not only observation for the sake of academic interest and trying to figure out what's going on, but also the observation will allow you to have formulation of your own opinions about what's going on, and then act on it. If you know that the results of your observation requires an action, whether you start a startup, you invent, you go to school to educate yourself, I think the collection of these two actions, in my opinion, are good advices for the future generation, because it will trickle down for each one to follow a path that is suitable for themselves, because that's how I believe, you know, the genesis of all of the innovations start from these two things.
It's amazing. Doctor?
I think advising is the tricky thing. But I think, in my opinion, I would ask younger generation to be responsible and realize the necessity, not just individual necessity, I think social necessity, future necessity. Once you realize the necessity, I mean, there is a statement, right? Necessity is mother of invention.
True.
So I think once you realize the necessity, definitely you will think seriously about doing something for that, right?
Yeah.
So I think be responsible and realize your necessities. I mean, that's what I mean when I say if there will be no water after 100 years, for example. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about your next generation. So please realize it and act on it. This is not one person issue. It's everybody's issue. I think, but I think they have to realize it. I think someone has to tap on their head and say, look, this is a serious issue, right? So it's just not, I mean, it's not just about water. I'm just saying about any issue. I think they have to realize the necessity.
That's true. I cannot thank you enough for this very insightful, very amazing panel. And I think water is, of course, the main topic, and it's very, very important. And SDG 6 under the SDGs is so much linked to health and well-being, SDG 1, and then you know, linked to everything. In fact, it's even linked to gender equality. If you think about areas where women have to actually go and walk miles to get just water, drinking water, and come back. And those are the people who we actually should be fighting for, who we should be helping, because they're already at that stage where it is a necessity. And I think that what we've learned from you, that the dreamers, and what we've learned from you is so valuable. And please keep dreaming, because you really do bring hope, not just for this country, but for the world. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us virtually, and I'd like to thank all of the people who joined us here. I hope this was insightful, and happy World Water Day, and please come to Expo. We have only 7 days left. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.